that we associate with demons. So a lot of cases that seem to be negative hauntings or even demonic activity may in fact be Djinn. And as Phil mentioned, the identity becomes apparent over a period of time. And sometimes you have to do a process of elimination. The Djinn also tend to be in it for themselves. There's a personal reason why they want to interact with human beings. They have free will. And whereas our demonic cases are more oriented towards spiritual battles for the state of a soul, the Djinn will go for wanting to play tricks or mess around with someone or pursue their objective of trying to gain territory in our world, or take possession of a body to have physical experiences. It's more self-directed than what we would call the satanic demon assault of a spiritual contest. The Djinn will make use of your life force and soul energy, most definitely, but they engage with people in sometimes very subtly different ways. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to educate people about the Djinn, and especially the paranormal investigation community, that these are entities who need to be taken into consideration when we're evaluating cases. And they may not be readily apparent, but we need to be looking for the signs so that we can make a better assessment of what we're up against.
So just to clarify, there is a difference between a Djinn possession and a demonic possession. They are two different entities.
Well, they can often do the same sorts of things. They can take possession of a body. They can influence your thoughts, your actions. People can have, strange actions, aberrant behavior, convulsive behavior, seemingly crazy states and things like that. But with the demonic possession, again, it boils down to a battle for the soul, where the Djinn may simply want some sort of experience in the physical world. So, as Phil mentioned, you're going to be into these cases with bargaining with an entity to find out what it wants and what it's going to take to get out. Whereas with a demonic possession, it's more of it's a battle of wills, that the exorcist ultimately forces the demon out by using the power of, the religious, the name of God, the power of Jesus, whatever the format they're using. It's a forced expulsion. There are rituals for forcing the Djinn out, but there tends to be more bargaining with them.
Yeah. However, in the Muslim belief is that you see there are no demons, and anything that they call devils are evil Djinn. There are no fallen angels in Islam. There are Djinn who have fallen. Angels are pure. They were made of the purest of light. They're incorruptible. They have no free will. So the devil in Islam is a Djinn by the name of Iblis. And his fall and out of heaven and away from the angels is very similar to the Christian idea of the fall of Lucifer. But in the Western world, Lucifer was an angel, but in the Islamic world, the fallen one is a Djinn, and he corrupted other Djinn to fall with him, and this is the idea they have. You go over in the Middle East, and I remember what one person said to me. He's an Islamic cleric, and he said, and he goes, he laughed, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he said, you believe in UFOs? He said, there are no UFOs. He said, there are no demons. There is no devil. He said, there is no ghost. There are no ghosts. There are only Djinn. So they see the Djinn as responsible for just about everything in the Western world. But in the Western world, we see the Djinn is excluded mostly from all of these paranormal happenings. While in the Middle East and even in the Near East, and as far as some of the countries in the Far East, Jinn are considered to be responsible for everything.
Honestly, I never heard of the Djinn until I watched The World Within, and Rosemary scared me to death. Now, the thing is with that was she said that because they have free will, there is really no way to exorcise them out. But with a demon, we exorcise them out. Now, we're also told if they're conducting an exorcism that you should never bargain with a demon. But here it is, if there's a Djinn, you're going to bargain with it. Now, is there a way, other than with the eyes, to actually know what you are dealing with when you're in that situation?
Well, there is scientifically, actually. You see, Djinn are dimensional. They exist in an area of spatial reality, physical world that's just like our own. So theoretically, when they actually merge dimensions, there should be an influx of elementary particles which can be picked up by instruments that are specially tuned for it, which we have designed. And another thing is that unlike a so-called demonic possession, which I'm not really sure really exists or not, because I've seen Djinn possession, the Djinn does not enter the body because it's afraid of being trapped in the body and not being able to leave. They say the Djinn connects through the brainstem and the spinal column, but is still separate from the body, but can control the body and feel everything that the body feels. But a Djinn can be very, very deceptive. It may use the idea that it's a demon, so it goes through the whole exorcism thing, and it may just be having fun, maybe just be laughing. But there is a way to get rid of Djinn. And in Islamic world, sometimes the Djinn will finally reveal what clan it belongs to. And by contacting the Djinn's clan member, you can actually get another Djinn to help you get rid of a psychotic Djinn or a bad Djinn, let's say. So there are times where other Djinn are called to help getting rid of a bad boy.
And that's something that you would never see in a demonic case. You would never bring in a demon to get rid of another demon. That would just be unheard of. Now, I do want to make it clear that there are exorcism techniques for the Djinn, and quite a variety of folk remedies and religious-oriented remedies against the Djinn. But as the Islamic commentaries on the Quran have noted for a very long time, they don't always work. And it has to do with the situation, the Djinn you're dealing with, and as Phil just mentioned, sometimes you got to bring in a bigger gun to get rid of a lesser one. The Djinn have free will, and the commentaries will tell you if the Djinn don't want to do something and they have the power to resist, they're not going anywhere. So they can be extremely difficult to expel from environments.
Now, with the Djinn itself, you were talking about how in the Islamic belief, in the Quran, it was mentioned how the one Djinn, head Djinn, Iblis, fell and he took some Djinn with him. I was wondering, I remember reading the story in the Vengeful Djinn. I was wondering if you could just quickly recount for us the similarities of that between Lucifer falling and Iblis falling. With the Djinn not wanting to bow down to humanity at God's will, and so they're cast out, is that all of the Djinn, or is it just those who followed Iblis? Were there still good Djinn who weren't cast out? I'm trying to get an understanding of the hierarchy of these Djinn, since it seems like they do have free will and they're not there, and they're not all the same.
Well, the Djinn were pushed out. Iblis refused to bow. When God created human beings, he told the angels to bow down, and the angels, having no free will, did so. But Iblis refused, and Iblis, although he was a Djinn, he was in heaven, he had access to heaven, and he refused on the grounds that human beings were inferior. And for this, he and his kind were cursed and cast out. And Iblis appealed to God and said, well, give us a chance to redeem ourselves. We'll prove it to you that human beings are not worthy. And so they were granted until Judgment Day to make their case. So all the jinn got pushed out, but it's not all of them are evil. Iblis and a faction of them became very embittered and turned against people because they lost what they considered to be rightfully their homeland. And other jinn adapted. They may not have liked it, but they've gone on with their lives, more or less. So they were all pushed out from our world, but not all of them became evil.
And to add to that, see, the jinn inhabited our world. And while over in the Middle East, I got this story. I heard a lot of stories about the jinn. And they were in this world. And they were in our universe, in our physical universe. They became very powerful. They started polluting the environment. They warred with each other. Jinn do war with each other just like humans. They developed terrible weapons and great power. They were on the verge of destroying themselves. And according to the legend, God said, in order to stop this, we have to get rid of the jinn. And what happened is that a number of powerful jinn united together, and they made war against the angels, and they lost. And, at the peace thing, they agreed to leave, even though some jinn were made to be left behind to help human beings adapt to this world and clean up the world. And this is where you get the idea that the stories is back in the Sumerian, the Sanskrit, and so on, in Mesopotamia, in the Middle East, or the Middle Eastern countries, that jinn used to interact with humans much more thousands of years ago than they do today. So we may be seeing that once again, where jinn are starting to interact more with the human race. But at one time, jinn and humans coexisted on this planet to a certain degree. And humans became the masters because they had this army of angels backing them up, according to the story.
Well, I have a question. Can jinns and humans marry, intermingle, have babies together? They can reproduce?
It's forbidden in Islam. Oh, it is. It's considered an abomination for a jinn and a human to have an offspring, even though they say it's possible. The child is born sterile. The child is born a sociopath, but with great power and power over the mind of humans. We have one example in history. The Queen of Sheba was supposed to be her mother was a jinn, a jinnaya, and her father was a human. And she became very brutal, and her powers of persuasion were so good that she corrupted the great King Solomon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard King Solomon was rumored to be part jinn.
Well, that's what they say, but Solomon, I don't think, was jinn. Sheba was jinn, and it depends upon what you read. That they in the Islamic belief they had an offspring, and the offspring were damned from the beginning. They became like the giants of long ago, mm-hmm. and they were abominations in the eyes of God. So in Islamic law, it's forbidden for humans and jinn to have offspring. And people would ask, how could this be possible? Well, we know we humans are physical beings, okay? And how could this be possible? How could a being of plasma, have a child with a human? Well, let's get down to atomic structure with DNA and the products that make DNA. Jinn have the ability to manipulate matter and energy. Some powerful jinn, some older jinn can actually take DNA and make DNA from themselves, and they can take on human form. So that's not too out of reach to believe scientifically. But even people who are like devoted Christians will say, "Oh, that's just a ridiculous story." Well, let's talk about Mary by the stream getting impregnated by God and the angel there. All of a sudden, a virgin birth. Here we have, the idea that angels or God can interact with human beings to produce offspring. So,
whereas our demonic cases are more oriented towards spiritual battles for the state of a soul, the Djinn will go for wanting to play tricks or mess around with someone or pursue their objective of trying to gain territory in our world, or take possession of a body to have physical experiences. It's more self-directed than what we would call the satanic, and they may not be readily apparent, but we need to be looking for the signs so that we can make a better assessment of what we're up against.
So just to clarify, there is a difference between a Djinn possession and a demonic possession. They are two different entities.
Well, they can often do the same sorts of things. They can take possession of a body. They can influence your thoughts, your actions. People can have, strange actions, aberrant behavior, convulsive behavior, seemingly crazy states and things like that. But with the demonic possession, again, it boils down to a battle for the soul, where the Djinn may simply want some sort of experience in the physical world. So, as Phil mentioned, you're going to be into these cases with demon assault of a spiritual contest. The Djinn will make use of your life force and soul energy, most definitely. But they engage with people in sometimes very subtly different ways. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to educate people about the Djinn, and especially the paranormal investigation community, that these are entities who need to be taken into consideration when we're evaluating cases that we associate with demons. So a lot of cases that seem to be negative hauntings or even demonic activity may in fact be Djinn. And as Phil mentioned, the identity becomes apparent over a period of time. And sometimes you have to do a process of elimination. The Djinn also tend to be in it for themselves. There's a personal reason why they want to interact with human beings. They have free will. And